Crazy Gadget is one of Sonic Adventure 2's most infamous stages, casually and in speedruns. Its gravity switching mechanic and difficult platforming made for a tough endgame gauntlet that frustrated many. But what if I told you that speedrunners found a way to use the stage's very own gimmicks against it? This is Speedrun Evolution, how a switch broke Crazy Gadget. In the early days of Hero's story, Crazy Gadget speedruns looked pretty similar to what a skipless run of the stage would look like now. Joselle had to abide by SDA's inbounds rule set like many other games did in the early days of speedrunning. Joselle really only added one major strategy here, which was puzzle skip, allowing you to skip the entire ending section of the stage. Besides good movement and blazing through the stage as fast as possible, there wasn't much remarkable about the stage. And speedrunners? Well, they'll always try their best to change that. Crazy Gadget became the home of one of Sonic Adventure 2's first major skips. Crazy Gadget Skip. Yeah, not a very creative name, but the strat more than makes up for its name's lack of creativity. When you reach this room in Crazy Gadget around 25 seconds into the stage, you're faced with a choice. The path on the left leads to a dead end. The path in the center takes you to where you need to go, but if you miss the rail, you die. And the path on the right is a safer path to progress. In the next Hero Story World Record, Sonic Guitar did the unexpected. He took the switch on the left. After what I had said earlier, this is probably a bit confusing, so let me explain. The left switch is supposed to be a dead end, but the developers overlooked something when they made this switch. If you jump on this checkered wedge and make a tight spin dash jump, using all of your hover frames and using a homing attack cancel, which is a homing attack that can give you a bit of extra distance, you can barely make it. And even if you do make this jump, the skip is far from over. Since we were able to reach this area with different gravity than intended, the game doesn't even try to make this easy for us. There are 3 different possibilities in this room. You hit the artificial chaos and homing attack to advance to the next room. You skip the room entirely, or you fail one of these and end up at the bottom. The only way to advance from here is if you're able to get hit and then attack the enemy. If the enemy is gone or you're out of rings, well, you're stuck. After this, you advance to the acid room. Here, you need to carefully land on this small strip of ground Sonic can stand on. Next, spin dash very carefully to not hit the acid or go back to the wall. Jump up and kill the enemy to unlock the door and escape the room. This room can be a point of death or even just time loss and makes the skip a bit more difficult to perform quickly. After advancing through the acid room comes the final test, clipping out of bounds due to the wrong gravity being active and going straight to the end of the stage. This ending section was relatively simple, however the turning camera did make things a bit more precarious. This skip was discovered in 2010 by Sonic Guitar himself and saved around 30 seconds if done optimally. This was one of the first major discoveries in Sonic Adventure 2 speedrunning and really made a massive difference when breaking the Hero Story World Record. After Sonic Guitar's run in 2010, years passed and Crazy Gadget discoveries stayed pretty quiet. Runners like Logan and Talon continued optimizing the stage, however there wasn't really any major changes. Talon then did something that was a catalyst for change. He got the run. The run involved the aforementioned Crazy Gadget skip, the newly found Eternal Engine skip, which at the time had an inconsistent setup, and the skip that involved going through a kill plane, the old Final Rush skip. Talon got all of these skips quickly, alongside a great run in terms of execution and RNG in the treasure hunting stages. The quick progress since the game's Steam release a few years prior came to a complete halt, as no one could seemingly beat this time. Well, from the outside it may have seemed like this was the case, but in the background the community was working on something huge. Crazy Gadget Skip? Skip. Yet again, another great name. This strategy involved, once again, using the switch to change Sonic's gravity, but instead of navigating the stage on its side, we break out of bounds, much earlier this time. In 2007, Sadistic Mystic stumbled upon this gap in kill planes. These days, we have much better tools to examine the game. We understand kill plane layouts and even have tools to look at the game through a level editor. When this trick was discovered, none of this was possible. So finding this small gap in kill planes from someone who had the capability to record and also just happened to be recording while it happened was a miracle. Clearly, not much came from this at first, since runs through 2014 were still using the older version of the skip, Crazy Gadget skip. However, they proved that the skip was actually able to reach the end of the stage through tasks after many years. 2014, in fact, was the year that they proved it was possible. Less than a year after Talon's incredible run, this trick was discovered, but the trick was considered to be tasks only, right? As I mentioned, the community was not done improving Sonic Adventure 2, and were determined to continue pushing the game. Crazy Gadget Skip, or CGSS, is done by hopping on the same ledge, but the other side. Instead of going forward to progress, these runners, they jumped into the void. This void was seemingly just one large kill plane, but they found out this wasn't exactly true. There was actually a small gap in between the multiple kill planes meant to completely cover the room. The same gap that Sadistic Mystic had found years before. If you weave Sonic around these kill planes, you can successfully navigate out of bounds. The next question was, how do you get to the goal ring from here? Well, the game doesn't exactly like us going out of bounds here, and the camera has a hard time adjusting. While troublesome, the camera was fairly consistent, so runners found a way to navigate this correctly, and if done just right, can hit the goal ring from the other side like the original skip. Now, they had found this strategy, but was it even possible to be done in real time? To most runners, the answer was unclear. Little was known about how exactly it worked, as the tools we have now weren't accessible then. This includes a level editor to see how your movements looked from other perspectives, input display to share and compare your inputs against other runners to learn, and other programs that could have assisted greatly. Two members of the community, Hazel and DarkPro, however, were determined to prove that the strategy was humanly viable at AGDQ that year. They went to work trying to find a setup, and when the event had ended, they had found it. CGSS was still known at the time as the ultimate risky strategy, and while proved to be possible, it would only ever be used in runs if the run had no other chance. And that is exactly what A_Mustache did. In October 2015, after losing some time in the desert section of the run was behind the world record going into Crazy Gadget, so Mustache made the bold call to try out CGSS. If he hit it, he would be ahead of the world record by about 10 seconds.
Yes! I got CGSS.
Really?
Yeah, I did.
With this, Mustache closed out the run and was able to secure a spot for himself in the history books. One side effect of this run, however, was that from now on, CGSS would be an expectation for any runner going for the world record of Hero Story. An obligation this became, much to these runners' distress. The runners Shibake, Emerldd, DarkPro, and Mustache would all trade the record back and forth over the course of the next year and a half until it settled in DarkPro's hands and stayed for quite a while. All of these runners had to not only learn CGSS, but master it, or world record would be firmly out of their reach. As they pushed the record lower and lower, it wasn't enough to just hit it first or second try anymore. They would need to get an optimized run and hit the skip first try. This requirement made Crazy Gadget much more of a menace to the runners involved and claimed many runs that were on world record pace. This continued into the era of dominance by a runner named Katie4 that I plan to talk about, but that's a story for another day. As more and more information came out about the skip, runners began to have a better grasp on what made it work and what they could do to make the skip more consistent. There were new methods of doing the skip and variations that made things more simple. One of these big innovations was the discovery of free camera, allowing runners to see where they were going while out of bounds. This was done in a few different ways, but the more commonly used method is jumping over this camera trigger here. When you run through it, the game sets the camera to behave in a certain way. When avoiding this trigger, the game just keeps the camera behind Sonic during the skip, allowing runners to take out some of the guesswork. While this strategy actually lost time, it made the out of bounds section much easier to handle and a lot more consistent. Another new method that helped CGSS was the box hover method. Box hover is another method of performing this strategy that simplifies the inputs and movements required to get out of bounds. Using a spin dash hover instead of a somewhat tight spin dash jump allows the runner to focus more on the angles that are required to weave around the kill planes. Using a spin dash hover is also slightly slower than a spin dash jump, allowing for more time to adjust. Similar to free cam, the box hover method actually lost time over the other setups, but many runners valued the consistency over the speed. Now, runners that weren't vying for the top spots often adopted both of these strategies, as getting the skip first try was more important than the 2 to 3 seconds these methods lost. Free cam is even used in most top level hero story speedruns to this day to ensure consistency. As a wise speedrunner once told me, sometimes you have to go slow to go fast. One thought you may have after hearing all of this is that speedrunners have only been going slower since the skip was first found, which in most hero story speedruns is actually valid. However, there have been other optimizations to Crazy Gadget and its skip. It was theorized that CGSS could be done without any setup at all, and in the Sonic Adventure 2 Human Theory TAS it was proven. Yes, this crazy method was possible in TAS, but could humans actually do it reliably? Considering it was part of the Human Theory TAS, they seem to think so. This required not only doing all of the craziness that came before, but having an inconsistent position and hardly enough distance to make it to the goal ring. It had to be too difficult to be pulled off in real time, right? But on July 21st, 2018, a sinister taco did this.
Yes! Huh. No problem.
This incredible run is the Crazy Gadget world record and has stood for almost 4 years at this point. I think this run can be summed up by saying that it only loses 2 seconds to Taco's very own Crazy Gadget Human Theory TAS. From maneuvering Sonic masterfully without even being able to see him at times, optimizing every possible section to the smallest of details, and then nailing a setupless version of one of the most difficult skips in the game, this is one of, if not the best IL in Sonic Adventure 2's history. While it's not currently clear if this is a strategy that will ever be adopted by hero story runners, it does exist, and it will always be there for the bold runners that want to save a few extra seconds. It's important to note, this run happened years ago. In the years after this, both free cam and box hover became more prevalent to make CGSS more consistent. Since the current era of SA2 has started, the skip known as the ultimate risky strategy has become simultaneously riskier and way more consistent. Like many other discoveries in speedrunning, the initial find is rarely the end. It's likely the start of a whole new journey. I'm DawnSR, and this is Speedrun Evolution.